Hey everyone, Dan here. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button and keep in mind that these are my own thoughts, opinions, and ideas. These are not meant to be, nor should you take them as investment or trading advice in any way, shape, or form. Do your own due diligence, put in the work for yourself, and make your decisions based on that. Enjoy. All right, folks, here we are after market close on Wednesday, October 4th. We're going to take a look at NVOS today. So NVOS pushing up through the upper levels that we had on the chart already. So we are going to move over to the daily chart in a moment and add some additional levels. But of note today, it re-entered this gap that starts at 38 cents, and we'll see the upper bound of this gap is, I think, at 61. We'll see it when we zoom out to the daily chart, but we see, if we bring in the levels that we had on the chart from yesterday, you would have seen it just sort of basing and leveling right here, right on this 31.52. And we'll flip over to the Think or Swim study as well and see if the TTM squeeze indicator gave us any information while that puppy was just kind of sitting there waiting. But if we look here on the 10-minute, we can see that it was this red triggering on the TTM squeeze indicator, and then when it fired right on this candle. So really good call outs on the 10-minute time frame with the TTM squeeze indicator. Always interesting to see when a stock starts to trigger on the indicator as it's just kind of basing, especially if it's basing at a level where you would expect it to be at anyway. And this 31.52 was something that we already had on the chart. And then when it fired, boy did it fire. Shot up into the gap that again starts here at about 38, shrugged right off the level that we had at 3997, basically 40 cents. Popped back down and then secured a base over the 35 level. And then what did we see? At open, we see a couple of candles here. Once again, triggering while it's finishing basing. And then it fired and bang, off to the races, through the gap, or into the gap, through 3997, and then through 4278. And then we see it as it first hit resistance, pushed through, confirmed support, so really strong motion there, and then was able to reach up here to 47.86, and now in the after hours coming down to maybe retest support there again right at that level. But really strong motion, really good call outs by the TTM squeeze indicator as that motion took place, and really happy with how the levels held up with this action. So no complaints there from my end. Now if we zoom out, let me take a further zoom here for a moment. So we have this big gap up here. The gap's on the daily, so you don't see it because I'm looking at the weekly right now. I'm just looking on the weekly to see where the previous price action is. Make sure that there is before I nauseate folks by scrolling. Yeah, we're not going to have a ton to go off of. We see a swing low of 97 here, and then this swing low was still over $1. So we're not going to have a ton to go off of at the moment. So we're going to do our best with basically what we have on the daily, and then we might have to zoom in a time frame to catch some additional levels. So let's see what we have above 42.78 in case this baby continues to push. Okay, so here's a strong level. You see candle body, 44.19. Going to be a pretty critical level for it. And then we have candle body and wick, so another good level, but there's probably levels in between here that maybe just haven't taken shape yet. 48.11. So if we see top of this wick, top of this candle body, and above that we're sort of in no man's land a little bit. This was on 9:14. So what if we go down to the 4 hour, go back and see if there's any good levels from here. Okay, so I would say there's a level in here, 46.23-ish. Yeah, it moved so quickly to that range on the 14th. It's not super apparent. So that's going to be about the best we have at the moment if we want sort of really critical ranges. There might be some additional ones that develop on lower time frames, but they may be weaker and they may sustain themselves for less period of time. So that's what I'm going to be looking at the moment, but securely in this gap at the moment. So we'll see how that continues to manifest. And as I mentioned before, really good call out on the TTM squeeze indicator for this one. So going into tomorrow, and even in the after hours here, what I'm going to be looking for is can it continue to base? If it can't, and it loses this level, this 42.78 level, I would at least want it to sort of hold this swing where it built a little base over here and was able to double push off of it. So that level is, I'm not going to put it on the chart, but it's right around 41.23. So 41.25, right around there. Maybe even stretching down here to just shy of 41 cents. You see candle body, wick, wick. So found decent support there. Now also of interest, if we get rid of these, the drawings here, let me do this, and then let's look at the volume as it came through today. So really interesting to note the heavy volume that came in at these relatively high levels. And you see it coming in here, picking up, you see it coming in here and sort of dying off a little bit. So that's going to be obviously the question. But even as we get down here, like we were just looking at, these levels down here, if it needed to, potentially trying to catch some support here, and that's right where you're going to catch a lot of volume, at least from today. So maybe if that continues to be the case, it was just really interesting to see the volume that was coming in at these higher and higher levels. We'll see if that continues to play out in the days ahead. You don't want to extract too much from one intraday chart, but it was of interest to me, so I thought we would come in here and note it. Now, let's go ahead and flip over to the Think or Swim study. All right, so here's our Think or Swim study. And here we're looking at a couple of different things. The channel, where the price action is situated in the channel. And then here also is the TTM squeeze indicator, and we'll look at different time frames with that TTM squeeze indicator as well. So this on the 10-minute, like we were just looking at. And if you look at the price action today, I mean, this is sort of showing you just how strong it was. So as the TTM squeeze indicator was triggering, it was settling right on the mid-range of the channel. And we're always interested in price action at the mid-range of the channel because that's where it's going to make a decision. It's going to push to the upper bound, to the lower bound, or is it going to continue to move sideways? And when it starts triggering at the mid-range of the channel, to the extent that that TTM squeeze indicator is giving you a good sign, there might be a big move that's about to pop off. And that's exactly what happened here. Triggering while it's settling, wrestling with the mid-range of the channel, and then bang, you see the fire here. And then this puppy really just rode this green bullish wave cloud the entire day until the very end when it sold off here and came down toward the mid-range of the channel. So if I'm a bull, I'm really happy with that motion intraday today, with how strong it was. It didn't need to pull back in and come down and really put in a big test of the mid-range of the channel. It didn't even need to dip that far. The dips were relatively light as it pertains to today's intraday action. Now, toward the end of the day, we do see a little bit of a flip of that. So I would be sort of curious how that sort of plays out in the hours ahead and as we get into tomorrow. Because this action here coming below the mid-range of the channel, when volume comes back in, right? You see how low the volume is here because it's after hours. When the volume comes back in, is that going to be able to retake the mid-range of that channel relatively quickly? That's what I would want to see if I'm a bull. Quick retake of the mid-range of the channel, and then once again building support and coming up to push either this or the very top of the bound of the channel. But even with high volume at close, we did see a push through the mid-range of the channel. But had this persisted in market hours, not aftermarket hours, we could have just seen it sort of wrestle with that mid-range of the channel a little bit. But just to note, as the day wore on, it does appear that the bulls did lose a little steam, or there was, just some profit taking, and this price action did come into a realm that it hadn't yet today, the mid-range of the channel. And you can see that how much the mid-range of the channel shifts price-wise, right? So it's also rising with the price action, so it's coming up higher and higher and higher. So it's sort of a less of a sort of significant threshold to reach for that price to come down and interact with it. Now, if we zoom out to the hour to get sort of another view of how this manifested, on the hour chart, even on the hour, pushing out through the upper bound of the channel and just basically riding that green wave cloud. Really good motion there. And here you see on a different time frame. So this set up in a slightly different time period, like literally, hours and minutes time period. This was triggering here because on this time frame, this was settling in during market hours yesterday. And then when it fired, then you see the big move kick off there. So another really good call out by the TTM squeeze indicator on that one as well. Now if we zoom out to the daily, so this will be our last view, that we will take some really big action here. So big outside of the channel action. What we always look for when a stock jumps outside of the channel, especially on the daily, but even on the intraday, is when is it going to pull back and test the mid-range of the channel. That's why I made such a big deal of it not coming down to test the mid-range of the channel on the 10-minute, because usually sooner than later, that's what you see, right? You see it here, and then when it tested it, what did it do? It immediately, big bang, back out of the channel. And then here's a really strong motion, right? When it's just riding the cloud. This is why that 10-minute motion was impressive. But then it draws into the channel, which inevitably happens. And then when it started to test the mid-range of the channel here, you see long top wicks. You see it sort of wrestling to try to maintain a hold of the mid-range, but really putting in quite a bit of price action below it. And then what do we see? We see an inevitable push-off to test the lower bound, the mid-lower bound of the channel, not all the way down here. So that's further signifying, maybe there's more juice to be squeezed in this bullish run. Even when it dips down to get sort of a swing low, it's not really anywhere near the lower bound of the channel like we saw down here, right? It's just this mid-lower bound of the channel. Quick retake, this is what I was talking about in the 10-minute, a quick recapture of the mid-range of the channel, and then a big push up. And so here's where we sit today. It didn't want to spend a lot of time outside of the upper bound of the channel today. It may not mean much of anything, but it's really interesting to see what's going to happen tomorrow. As it sits with this recent price action here, this is still indicating that this is simply a reduction of bearish momentum that we saw from this big sell-off here, right? That resulted in the complete dying off of the bullish momentum, reach the baseline, and then picking up of the bearish momentum. And now this signifies maybe all that this is this isn't even the really big push yet, but that this is simply the dying down of the bearish momentum. We'll see if that sort of proves out in the days ahead, but that is sort of the info that we have based on what we're seeing at the moment. All right, folks, I hope that you're happy, that you had a happy hump day. Get your words together, Daniel, and that you finish your week off strong in the days ahead. And as always, I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next video.